They say that when you're at the top of the mountain, the only people who can truly see you are the ones at the bottom looking up. Sterling Vance was a titan, a man who built a world of gold, only to be surrounded by vultures dressed in designer suits. His friends were thieves, his employees were spies, and his wife was his greatest enemy. They all wanted a piece of his soul, and they thought they had won. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot to look at the girl holding the cleaning rag. They didn't realize that the black maid they treated like a shadow was actually a guardian angel with a memory like a steel trap. In a house full of high society monsters, the only person with the heart to save the king was the girl they thought was invisible. This is the story of how kindness became a weapon, and how a girl with nothing saved a man who had everything. The world thinks Sterling Vance is a king, but I am the only one who knows he is a prisoner in a palace of snakes. My name is Ebony, I'm 24 years old, and for the last 2 years, I have been the invisible girl in the white apron, polishing the floors of a $30 million mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. To the Vance family, I am just a pair of hands that scrubs toilets and serves tea. They talk over me like I am a piece of furniture, never realizing that the person they ignore is the person who sees every one of their dirty secrets. They think I am nothing. But today, I am the only thing standing between a good man and his grave. The night of the Winter Gala was supposed to be Sterling's crowning achievement, but instead, it became the scene of a cold-blooded crime. I stood in the shadows of the grand ballroom, holding a tray of crystal flutes when I saw it. Sterling, a man who had built a tech empire from nothing, suddenly clutched his chest, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. He collapsed onto the marble floor, his lungs gasping for air that wouldn't come. But as he fell, I didn't see panic on the faces of his inner circle. I saw a look of silent, predatory triumph. His wife, Marlo, a woman 20 years his junior with eyes like polished ice, didn't scream for a doctor. She didn't kneel to hold his hand. Instead, she caught the eye of Caspian, Sterling's business partner and supposed best friend. They shared a look, a sharp, chilling flash of a smile that disappeared as quickly as it arrived. Marlo then let out a practiced, theatrical shriek, throwing herself onto her husband's body, not to help him, but to block anyone else from getting close. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. The king was falling, and the vultures were already sharpening their claws. Before I came to work here, my life was a series of closed doors. I grew up in a small town in Georgia, raised by a grandmother who taught me that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest, and the quietest person is the one with the power. I moved north with nothing but a suitcase and a dream of sending money back home to pay for my brother's medical bills. When Sterling Vance hired me, he was the first person in years who looked me in the eye and asked me my middle name. He was a man of immense wealth, yet he treated the gardener with the same respect he gave a senator. But the house was full of rot. Sterling's adult children, Jackson and Sienna, were the definition of generational disrespect. They were in their 30s, but lived like spoiled toddlers on their father's dime. They would walk across a floor I had just mopped with muddy boots, laughing as they watched me scrub it again. They mocked their father's aging, calling him the dinosaur behind his back, counting down the days until his pension and estate would be theirs. They didn't see a father. They saw an ATM that was taking too long to break. In the weeks following the gala, the house became a tomb. Sterling was brought home, but he wasn't recovering. He was getting worse. His mind, once sharp as a razor, seemed to be drifting away. Marlo insisted on private care, firing his longtime nurses and taking over his medication herself. She told the world he was suffering from early-onset dementia. She restricted his visitors, telling his old friends that he was too embarrassed to see them. I watched from the hallways as his vibrant spirit began to flicker like a candle in a drafty room. One morning, while I was emptying the trash in the master suite, I found something that made my heart stop. Buried beneath a pile of expensive silk tissues was a small, amber-colored vial with no label. It was empty, but the residue inside had a strange, metallic scent. My mind raced back to the vitamins Marlo gave him every morning in his tea. I tucked the vial into my pocket, my hands shaking. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was a witness to a slow-motion execution. That afternoon, I was polishing the banister near the library when the door cracked open. I heard voices, low, urgent, and cruel. It was Marlowe and Caspian. They weren't talking about Sterling's health. They were talking about his death. "The lawyer has the papers ready," Marlowe whispered, her voice dripping with greed. "Once he signs the power of attorney, we move him to the Shady Pines facility, the memory care wing. He'll never see the sun again, and we'll have the keys to the kingdom." Caspian chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "He's a ghost already, Marlowe. He won't even know what he's signing. By the time the kids realize the money is diverted into our offshore accounts, we'll be halfway to the Mediterranean. It's what he deserves for holding on to that seat for so long." They laughed then, a dry, hollow sound that echoed through the library. My blood turned to fire. They weren't just stealing his money. They were stealing his dignity, his life, and his very identity. I moved to walk away, to get to the kitchen and think, but my hip caught the edge of a heavy bronze vase. It wobbled, the base scraping against the wood with a loud, jarring screech. The laughter inside the library stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I froze, my breath trapped in my throat, praying the floor would swallow me whole. The library door swung open with a violent snap. Marlowe stood there, her eyes narrowing as they landed on me. Her gaze moved from my face down to my apron pocket, where the outline of the hidden vial was clearly visible. A slow, wicked grin spread across her face, but her eyes remained dead. "Ebony," she said, her voice a terrifying purr, "I didn't hear you lurking there. You've been a very busy girl today, haven't you?" The air in the hallway turned to ice as Marlowe's eyes bored into my pocket. I could feel the weight of that amber vial burning against my thigh like a hot coal. My heart was a drum in my chest, thumping so hard I was sure she could see my apron vibrating. For a second, I saw the mask of the grieving wife slip completely, revealing the face of a woman who would kill to keep her secrets. But I remembered what my grandmother always told me. When you're scared, Ebony, lean into the work. People don't suspect a person who is busy. I forced my hands to stop shaking and pulled a microfiber cloth from my other pocket, looking at her with the blank, wide-eyed expression they expected me to have. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Vance," I whispered, keeping my voice low and humble. "I was just checking the molding for dust. Mr. Vance's cough has been so bad, I thought maybe the allergens were the problem. I'll go start on the guest wing right away." I bowed my head and started to move past her, my breath shallow. Marlowe reached out, her hand like a claw gripping my upper arm. Her nails dug into my skin through my uniform. "The vial, Ebony," she hissed, her voice a jagged blade. "What did you pick up from the trash?" My mind raced. I knew if I showed it to her now, I wouldn't make it out of this house. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled, sticky candy wrapper I had found earlier. "Just this, ma'am. Mr. Sterling isn't supposed to have sugar, and I didn't want the ants to get to it." She stared at the wrapper for an eternity, her eyes searching mine for a lie. Finally, she shoved my arm away with a look of pure disgust, as if she had just touched something filthy. "Get out of my sight," she spat, "and stay out of the master wing. If I see you near my husband's room without being called, you'll be back on the street before your shift ends." I didn't look back. I hurried to the service stairs, my legs feeling like jelly, knowing I had just survived a brush with a predator. The next few days were a blur of quiet, agonizing tension. The house felt like a pressure cooker. Marlowe and Caspian were always in corners, whispering, while the lawyer, a man named Sterling's oldest friend, now turned traitor, became a constant fixture. But in the late hours of the night, when the house finally went silent and the snakes went to their dens, I would slip into Sterling's room. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I couldn't let him die alone. I would sit by his bed, using a cool cloth to wipe the sweat from his brow. He was a shell of the man he used to be, his eyes clouded and his hands trembling. One night, as I squeezed his hand, he suddenly gripped mine back with surprising strength. His eyes cleared for a brief second, the fog of the poison lifting just enough for him to see me. "Ebony," he rasped, his voice a ghost of its former power. "They think I'm gone. They think I can't hear them." My heart broke for him. Here was a man who donated millions to schools and hospitals, now being discarded like trash by the people he loved. "I know, Mr. Sterling," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "I won't let them hurt you anymore." He pointed with a shaking finger toward the old grandfather clock in the corner of the room. "The back panel," he breathed, "the blue folder. It's not about the money, it's about the truth. Take it." Before he could say more, his eyes rolled back and the heavy, drugged sleep took him again. I moved to the clock, my fingers fumbling with the dark wood. I found a hidden latch and pulled. Inside was a folder filled with bank statements and a USB drive. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a will. It was a record of every dollar Marlowe and Caspian had stolen from the company over the last 5 years. Sterling had known for a long time that they were betraying him, but he had been too heartbroken to act until they started poisoning him. I realized then that I wasn't just his maid, I was his last line of defense. But the peace of that quiet moment was shattered the very next morning. I was in the kitchen preparing a tray when I heard the heavy front doors slam. The air in the house changed. It felt violent. I stepped into the foyer to see Marlowe, Caspian, and the crooked lawyer standing over Sterling, who had been wheeled into the center of the room. He looked confused and terrified. "Just sign it, Sterling," Marlowe was saying, her voice loud and mocking. "It's a power of attorney. It's for your own good. We're moving you to a facility where they can handle your condition." I don't want to go," Sterling stammered, his hand shaking as the lawyer pressed a pen into his fingers. The adult children, Jackson and Sienna, stood by the stairs, looking at their phones, bored by their father's suffering. "Just sign it, Dad," Sienna groaned. "We have a flight to Aspen in 3 hours. We don't have time for this." I felt a rage so hot it blinded me. This was the extreme end of their cruelty. They were going to sign away his life right in front of me. I knew I had to act, but I couldn't just scream. I had to be smart. I grabbed the tray of boiling hot Earl Grey tea and walked into the center of the room. As I approached the table where the documents were laid out, I tripped over the edge of the rug. It was a calculated fall, a desperate gamble. The tray flew from my hands and the scalding water splashed across the table, soaking the legal documents and burning Marlowe's expensive silk dress. The room erupted. Marlowe let out a piercing scream of fury, jumping back as the tea ruined her outfit. "You clumsy, stupid girl," she shrieked. She didn't just yell. She lunged at me, her hands swinging in a wide arc. The slap echoed through the marble foyer, the force of it spinning my head around and sending me to the floor. My cheeks stung like fire, but I didn't cry. I looked at the table. The papers were a soggy, illegible mess. I had bought him time. But Marlowe wasn't finished. She turned to the lawyer, her face contorted with malice. "Call the police," she commanded, her voice trembling with rage. "I found my 5-card diamond ring in her quarters this morning. This isn't just a clumsy accident. She's a thief who's been skimming from this family for years. I want her in handcuffs, and I want her out of my house now." As the lawyer reached for his phone, I looked at Sterling. He was looking at me, and for the first time I saw a spark of fire in his eyes. The war had begun.